Is it on? Yeah, okay, everyone can hear. Good morning, welcome to Christ Church. For those that don't know me, I don't know if anyone doesn't know me, but my name is Dave, and I'm part of the pastoral team here. It is really good to be here this morning, and I'm thankful that my friend Alejandro is back from Colombia from his visit there. But it's good to be here this morning. We're glad that you have come to worship with us. And we are also thankful for all those on Zoom that are also participating this morning. So this morning I want to start with a question, and the question is, have you ever been lost? And I'm going to ask that you raise your hand if you've ever been lost at some point in life. I've been lost before. And when you're lost, it's good to have a map, and it's good to have a smartphone with GPS. But in this picture that you're looking at, this is a picture of a place that's very special to me in Tucumán, Argentina. And it's an area called Tafí del Valle. And a few years ago, I was lost with a friend of mine. We were on a hiking trip for 2 days, 50 kilometers, and we didn't have a map. I didn't have a map, and I didn't have GPS. But what I had was I had a guide named Jorge. And Jorge knew the trail that we were on, and this is actually a picture of that trail. And he knew the trail, but he hadn't been on that trail for over 20 years. So when we started out on the trail, everything was fine until the trail split in two. And I thought we should turn to the right and go east. Jorge was sure that we needed to turn left and go west and climb a huge mountain that I didn't feel like I wanted to climb if it was the wrong way. So I told Jorge, I said, Jorge, you can climb the mountain, and I'll wait here on you. And when you reach the top of the mountain, you can wave at us, you can signal to us if it's the right path. And so my other friend and I, we waited and rested as Jorge slowly climbed this huge mountain until he reached the top, and he looked out and shook his head and slowly turned around and walked all the way back down the mountain. And this was maybe 20 minutes. I don't know how long it took, 30 minutes. And he came down to tell us what we already knew. We need to go east. We need to turn right, because that was the correct path. And so that's what we did, and we reached our destination. Now, fortunately in life, I haven't been lost too many times, I think. You can ask my wife, you can ask my family, but I don't remember being lost too many times. But what I can remember, and what's affected me much more, has been the times that I felt lost emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, needing direction. This has been a much bigger challenge, and this has led me to the verse I've chosen for my year verse, which is Jeremiah 6:16. This verse says, "This is what the Lord says. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it. And you will find rest for your souls. But you said, we will not walk in it." Now, this is a short text, but the more that I meditate on it, the more I find a pattern for guidance and peace. So let's take a look at its instructions. This is God speaking originally to his people and speaking to us as well if we will listen. The message originally was to the nation of Israel because they were living in greed and dishonesty. Corruption was affecting every part of their nation, every part of their society. And God was calling them back, calling them to the good way, calling them back to righteousness, calling them back to loving others and treating others well. And personally, there are times when I need to be redirected. There are times when I know I'm not on the right path, or I need to make a change in my life. And it could be a major change, a major decision, or it could be something internal in my attitude or my behavior towards others, there are times when I need to change direction. So let's look more deeply at this text and what its instructions are. First, it tells us to stand at the crossroads. Other versions say to stop. In other words, God is asking us to pause our activities, slow down, to pause our worries, to pause the noise, and to get rid of all distractions. Just as we practice here at Christ Church, we practice silence, we practice stillness, and listening to God and hearing His voice and seeing how He's speaking to us. I tend to get busy, to get distracted. I become active, but I don't always stop to see if I'm on the right path. And so for that reason, stopping and pausing and resting must be a part of my daily and my weekly rhythms. And this leads us to the second instruction. The verse also calls us to look. While standing at the crossroads with many paths, many options, many alternatives, God asks us to evaluate where are we at, to reflect. Our busyness can often prevent us from realizing what direction we are going in. Sometimes it's not where we would like to be. Or maybe it's confirmation. Maybe when we stop and we look, we realize we're on the right path and we're going in the right direction. But we'll never know until we stop and we look. If we wouldn't have stopped on that trail with my friend Jorge, we would have climbed a huge mountain, we would have gone the wrong direction, and we would have been lost and tired, and maybe we wouldn't have reached our destination. So sometimes it's very important to stop and look to see where you're at. Otherwise, the years pass, and we keep on the same path, simply because it's familiar and maybe even comfortable. Maybe we have to come to a crossroads and we have to decide which way to go. Do we go right? Do we go left? But what is the correct path? What options and decisions are before us? So this is a time of reflection. When I was in Argentina, I worked with many people in addictions recovery. And some of the people in recovery were very serious about their recovery. They were very sincere, and others were not as serious about their recovery. They weren't necessarily sincere. But one of the main differences that I saw in those that truly wanted to make changes was that those that wanted to make changes had reflected on the direction of their lives, and they had decided that they were on the wrong path, that their addiction was profoundly damaging themselves and those around them. They stopped, they looked, and they did not like where they were at, and they were frightened by where they were going. They were dissatisfied with their present reality. And so sometimes when we stop and we look, sometimes we're dissatisfied. Sometimes we want something different. Sometimes God is saying that He has something different and better for us. So this leads us to the third thing we're told to do in this text. To ask. To ask for what? The ancient paths, it says, the ancient paths, the good way. Now, what is God referring to here? Does He mean some ancient trail like the Inca Trail, which also passes through Tucumán, if you're interested in knowing that? Or the Roman roads that you can still find today? No, God is inviting us on an ancient path of faith in Him. This is its general meaning. It is a road that many have traveled before us and will serve us as well. So what does it mean to live by faith in God? It means that we trust that He is good, that He's loving, that He's true. We trust that His way will lead to the best possible life that we could live, and that He will faithfully fulfill all of His promises. And it also means that He will be our guide, leading us as we trust in Him. The good way is the way of faith. But also, beyond that, there are things that are very specific to each one of us. There's also a specific path for each of our lives. We are each unique. And God has a unique plan for each one of us. And we were designed for a specific purpose. So we can ask for the good way, which is for all people that God has, which is a way of faith in Him. But we can also ask for the good path for each one of us in our own lives. So what do we do if we stop and we look and we ask for the good path and we find it? What do we do? Well, that should be obvious. And we walk in it. We take the good path. It's out there. We know where it is. We know where to go. We just have to walk in it. But there are times when we look at that path and we say, I don't like that path. It looks hard. It looks long. I didn't like the path that my friend Jorge wanted to take up that mountain. It looked very treacherous and long and tiring. Sometimes we don't like it, but if it is the good path and the good way, then that is the best option for us. We must follow the path, even if it is new to us. This might mean making a significant life change, or it could be a change of one's heart and a personal transformation that one needs to make with God's help. But it can be scary. It can be uncomfortable. But God is always inviting us to something good. Now, I have two people that I'd like to tell you about that are heroes for me personally. And their names are Jim and Ina Smith. They are both probably approaching 90 years old. And Jim, when he was approaching retirement, he had been a physician, a surgeon, successful for many years, very well respected. And when he reached retirement, him and his wife, who were on a good path of faith, asked God what was the next path for their retirement. And God answered, taking them to a surprising place, taking them to the home country of Maxime, to Cameroon. They went for 2 years. The idea was to go for 2 years to help establish a hospital in a remote village where there was very little health care. But those 2 years turned into 20 years of service and an incredible impact on countless lives. So they were probably 65 when they went. When they finally retired, they were about 85. And they didn't retire because of age, they retired because of health. And I had the joy of being at a retirement celebration for Jim and Ina. And I'll never forget what Jim told me. He said, we had 20 great years in Cameroon. They were the best years of my life. Please don't tell my family. What happened to a couple ready to retire? They found great joy in serving and loving others. They asked for the good way that was specific to them, and they walked in it as God gave it to them. Now, in case you're wondering, God doesn't ask all of us to leave our home country to follow Him, to find the good path. But here in Christ Church, many have left their home country. Some are visiting right now. And we know what that's like to make that decision. And if you're a person of faith, then that means following God to a new place, a new country, trusting that He has something good for each one of us. But following the good path doesn't mean we have to leave our home or leave our home country. It just means that we trust God for the way that He's leading us and for His guidance. And when we do that, God promises something that is very important as we follow this path. God promises that we will find rest for our souls. Now, I find this quite ironic that on a journey, traveling a new path, God promises rest. That doesn't make sense. If I'm traveling, if I'm walking, if I'm in a wilderness, I should be tired. But God is promising us, as we follow him, as we go through life, he promises rest for our souls. It's a promise of spiritual rest, of peace in our souls, something that he will give us that we can enjoy. The promise is not for an easy path, but for peace on that path. And it reveals to us that our time of pausing and silence actually leads to movement, into action, and a profound rest in the middle of it all, a peace that can sustain us along the way. Now, Jesus also called himself the way. We know that he said in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He's saying, I am the good path. But he also invites us to rest. Listen to his words here in Matthew 11, 28 through 30. Here Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus is a great guide, much better than my friend Jorge. And he's a great traveling companion who invites us to follow him. And in inviting us to follow him, he also promises us rest for our souls as we move ahead in trust. Now, sometimes we know that we don't know what lies ahead. There's uncertainty. And I'd like to share one other favorite place of mine with you. It's a place in the United States called the Lost Creek Wilderness. And it has a spectacular view that few people find because it's very difficult to get there. And the first time that I went with my wife. We met some fellow travelers, and they gave us specific instructions how to find this place. And here are the instructions. I'm going to walk you through it here in a moment with pictures. The instructions were, after hiking for 6 kilometers on a trail, you arrive. Sorry, I'm stepping outside of the camera. Sorry, everyone on Zoom. You walk 6 kilometers on a trail, and you reach 2 abandoned cabins that were used by miners many years ago. And you turn right. You walk for another kilometer, and you reach many large rocks and boulders. There you have to climb over the boulders until you find a fallen tree trunk. At the fallen tree, you start to climb left until you find this cave. So when you find the cave, you climb down into the cave, you descend into the cave, and go forward until you find, if we go back one slide, if that's okay, till you find this crevice or this crack in the rocks. And there you must turn sideways and slowly walk through this crack until you come out to a rock ledge with trees. And you emerge from the crack, and you step out, and you see this beautiful valley where a hidden river exists, full of, if we go to the next slide, you'll see the picture of the valley, full of large rocks, a beautiful place. And the picture doesn't really show how beautiful it truly is, but it's a place where you arrive and you just stop and you look. And you take everything in and enjoy the beauty. The first time I went, I was with Ellie, and we just stopped and we just sat and looked at all the rocks and the beauty, and we could see different formations, different shapes in the rocks. different images, and we rested in the middle of a long journey. But if we wouldn't have followed the directions, we would have never arrived. We had no idea how to find this place. But someone told us the steps, the instructions to find this hidden treasure. And because of that, we were able to experience something absolutely beautiful. And I've gone back, and I've taken others to see the same place because I want others to experience the same place that's so special to me. But the truth is that I believe that God is inviting us as well. That God is inviting us to stop and trust His guidance, to trust the steps He's asking us to take. And sometimes like this trip, this journey, it's not easy. It wasn't easy to climb over rocks and go down into a cave. But God promises us that if we follow His words, we'll discover incredible beauty, incredible goodness in Him, and even rest, and all those things in this life and even more in the life to come. So the last question that I have for today to leave with all of you is this, is what will you do with the good way? The way of faith. Or maybe the good way that God is putting before you. I know right now, there's so many people. There's a lot of people missing today, but so many people that are here, that are on Zoom, that are part of this community, that are making difficult decisions, where they're facing uncertainty about their future, or they're having a difficult, maybe they're passing through a difficult moment or time for many different reasons. And my prayer is that God would show you the good path of faith and a good specific path for your life and for your loved ones. And what will you do with the good way? Will you walk in it? And if you walk in it, will you find rest? Because that's what God promises. He promises to give us rest for our souls. Now, at this time, we're going to continue thinking about, we're going to make a transition into communion. We're going to continue thinking about those questions. I'm going to step down here. So we're going to take a moment of reflection, and you can close your eyes if you want. You can bow your head. And we're just going to take a moment to pause and think about these questions. First, to stop. If you can clear out the clutter and the noise, and stop and listen. Where are you at right now? Maybe in circumstances, in life, maybe right now in this moment. What are you experiencing? What are you feeling? What are the messages that you're listening to? And right now, Jesus, we ask for the good path. Show each one of us the good path. So ask God for the good path for your life. How does He want to lead you? What is He asking you to do? And then think about what it would mean to walk in that path. What would it mean to go forward? Maybe a new path, maybe the same path you're on. And what it would mean for you to find rest for your souls.